As we continue our series on Excel and then the different versions of Excel and the ribbons that you see, today we're going to look at the Data tab. Now the Data tab has more advanced features than we may have looked at in the past, but we will look at some of those features in a little detail, or at least get an introduction to them. Hi, I'm Terry, one of the Digital Innovation Specialists for Mid-Continent Public Library, and let's look at that Data tab. When we look at the desktop ribbon, we can see that there are several different groups here. Starting on the left, we have a Get and Transform Data group that works very closely with the next group here, the Queries and Connections group. To the right of that, there are data types, the Sort and Filter group, where we can sort or filter. To the right of that, we have Data Tools. To the right of that, we have the Forecast group, and in it you have the What If Analysis button that has several different options, and then Forecast Sheet. And then you have an Outline group, and that is your desktop ribbon. When we look at the Online Classic ribbon, we can see that, well, it's way shorter than the desktop version, so we know that we're going to be missing some buttons. Well, let's start at the far left where we have the Get and Transform Data group. There are only two buttons here, Data from Picture and Data from Power BI. Going on then, we have the Queries and Connections group. When we look at the data types group here for the classic ribbon, well, it's basically a button with a drop-down arrow, and it doesn't give us any hint as to what those data types might be compared to what we see with data types in the desktop version. Going on from there and to the right, we have a Sort and Filter group. So we have Sort Ascending and Descending and a Custom Sort. We also have a Filter that is in both places, and we have Clear and a Reapply in both of these ribbons. The classic ribbon does not have Advanced Filter, so a slight difference. Going to the right, we again just have a drop-down arrow for Data Tools, whereas with our desktop version, all of the different tools have their own icon. To the right of that, we have Outline, and again, it's just a drop-down arrow with no way to discern what that means, but hopefully it will match the Outline group here on our desktop version. Now, to the left of that, though, is Forecast, and there is no Forecast group within the Classic ribbon. When we look at the Online Single Line ribbon, we're going to see that there are quite a few differences here. Now, it starts with Sort and Filter. So here we have Sort Ascending and Sort Descending, which does match these two buttons on our classic view. We also have Custom Sort, and that matches Custom Sort. To the right of that is Filter. Now it has a drop down, so it's highly likely that the Filter drop down here simply matches Clear and Reapply. To the right of that, we do have some of those data tools. So data validation, for example, if we look at this icon and then look at the desktop version, we can see, well, data validation is this button here. We can come back down, split text to columns. We can see that the desktop version, we do have text to columns. There is a flash fill, which also matches, and then there's remove duplicates, and remove duplicates has the red X, so it is here. Our Online Single Line ribbon also has the three dots for more. Let's go ahead and click on this More button, and when I do, we can see that, oh, well, here is Convert to Data Type, and Data Type has the stocks, currencies, and geography. Here we have data from Power BI. For data, we have Refresh All. We have the Queries and Connections and Workbook links. Now, these tend to be in the queries and connections group, but it's nice to know that we have those options as well. And then for outline, we have both group and ungroup. What it doesn't show is subtotals. But this More button adds to our ability to work in Excel with the online version. Now let's look at an even more direct comparison. From the desktop, we have the Get and Transform Data group. And while we have a Get and Transform Data group for the classic ribbon and for the single line ribbon, we can see that there is just so much more here. Here we definitely have from picture that matches data from picture and then data from picture. What we don't really see in any great detail is this data from Power BI. And let's look at how we might get and transform data. Now, get and transform data could be called a query. We're deciding how we want to bring that data into our spreadsheet. We're going to click on this Get Data drop-down, and from here we have all sorts of choices from File, from Database, from Azure, from Power Platform, and online services and other sources, and then we can combine queries. So we might use a combine query and combine two different files. Before we can combine them, though, we need to bring them both into this workbook. So I'm going to go with From File and then from Excel Workbook, and we're going to look at zip codes and click on Import. And then we wait just a little bit, and it says, okay, we've opened up the zip codes workbook. What sheet or sheets do you want to pull in? Well, we'll just go with sheet 1, and I get a sampling of how this looks, and then I can come down to load, and I'm just going to click on the load button here in the lower right. And when I do that, it brings in the first worksheet that I'm interested in, and you can see that it's brought in 4 people. We now have a pane that says Queries and Connections, which is the second group within our Data tab. But let's go back and get some more data. So from File and from Excel Workbook, we're going to find addresses 2 and import. And this is also sheet 1 of that workbook, and we'll just load. We get this second set of names and addresses, and it says on the right hand side that we now have 2 queries, and each of them have 4 rows. I'm going to go back to the Data tab, and now we're going to get data, and from the drop down we're going to come down to Combine Queries. Click on it, and then we're going to append. Take one and add the second one to it at the bottom. So I have 2 tables. We'll say okay, but this is essentially a query where we've taken 2 worksheets and pulled them together. And then we're going to close and load. I have this append 1 worksheet, and I have all of the information for all 8 records, which was 2 separate worksheets. And then, of course, over at the right, I have a listing of the queries and connections. When I go back to the Data tab, you can see that we have Get and Transform Data, which is how we got our data, but this next group, Queries and Connections, well, it's the same thing as that pane that we just looked at. Going to the right of that, we have the Data Types group. It is kind of an interesting group in that you can get interactive updates. When we look at stocks, I can choose the kind of information I want, for example, yesterday's closing or today's high. And then as those numbers change, my spreadsheet automatically changes. Same thing with currencies. And then with geography, I've typed in a city and state, and it will give me information about the city and perhaps the county, depending on, again, the drop-down list and the choices that I have made. But when I look at the Online Classic ribbon, data types is simply the drop down, but once I get past that drop down, I have the same three choices. To the right of that, with the single line ribbon, we can also look at the data types there, but this is under the More button on the far right. And when we click that arrow that's pointing to the right, it gets us to stocks, currencies, and geography, just like the other ribbons. If we look at sort and filter with the Online Classic ribbon, we can see that this is almost a direct match, except for that advanced filter. And then when we look at our online single line version, we have the sort ascending, descending, custom sort. And then for the filter, we can again clear and reapply. So the only place that we can find the advanced filter is in the desktop version. But an advanced filter uses criteria ranges, which gives you even more flexibility in finding the information that you're looking for. When we look at the data tools, there are some differences when we look at the different ribbons. So, for example, with the desktop version, we have text to columns, and we also have text to columns in the Online Classic version. And we also have it here in a slightly different place, though, with the single line ribbon. Going on from there, we have the Flash Fill, but it's about the fourth choice here in the single line version. Down from here, we have the Remove Duplicates button, and that's a great one to use. And as we look, we have it here in the Classic ribbon, and it's the last choice, though, within the single line ribbon. From there, we have data validation. And so we can find it here at the bottom of that center column within Data Tools. And it's about the next to the last one here within the Online Classic version. And data validation is the very first thing within the single line ribbon. Well, let's go ahead and look at these three buttons just so we know what they are within the desktop version of Data Tools. As I hover my mouse, I can see that this is Consolidate Spreadsheet. Below that, we can actually define relationships between tables. Below that, we have the Power Pivot window. Only found in the desktop version, we have a forecast group. And with the forecast group, you have several choices of what if analysis or forecast sheet. And generally what this does is the what if analysis will let you create a spreadsheet of some kind and use a formula that has at least one cell that if you change the contents of that cell, it'll change the outcome of the whole idea of that spreadsheet. And so we have what if analysis. And then the forecast sheet simply takes numbers. Let's say it's the sales for a company for several months, and based on the existing information, what does it think is going to happen next or in the future? Looking at the last group, the outline group, we can see that group and ungroup work with all three. There is a total match. Subtotals can be found in another video that we've already done. Subtotals can be a remarkable tool. To learn even more, be sure to go to mymcpl.org/online learning for such great resources as Universal Class, Learning Express Library, LinkedIn Learning, and Udemy Business. We also premiere videos every Wednesday and Friday at 1 o'clock. If you miss a video premiere, you'll still be able to find it later when it's convenient for you. You can find us on Facebook at MCPL 360, and you can find us on YouTube by going to our MCPL MO channel.